Welcome to Matters Financial and Geopolitical from a Frontier. I trust you had a great weekend. Let's start with some macro thoughts. The euro surged to the highest since January 2015 after the Draghi speech at Jackson Hole. It got, I think, as high as 119.60 overnight, but I can't be sure. It's now at 119.25. A lot, in my view, is now being taken on trust. And I think a lot of the euro's strength is inversely about dollar weakness. Draghi says protectionism is a threat to global economic growth. That was at Jackson Hole. Home thoughts, we had quite an extraordinarily good weekend. We spent the night at Sereni and watched, well, I didn't sleep because we stayed up to watch this big fight, and I took this photograph of, it's a night shot of the pool and the hotel, and it's at the edge of Nairobi National Park, and I thank Carl Haller for that. That was most enjoyable. I had a super dinner upstairs. He's got this fabulous restaurant on the 4th floor. It really is lovely. Your brain doesn't contain memories, it is memories, says Wired. Recall your favorite memory, the big game you won, the moment you first saw your child's face, the day you realized you had fallen in love. It's not a single memory though, is it? Reconstructing it, you remember the smells, the colors, the funny things some other person said, and the way it all made you feel. Your brain's ability to collect, connect, and create mosaics from these milliseconds long impressions is the basis of every memory. By extension, it is the basis of you. This isn't just metaphysical poetics. Every sensory experience triggers changes in the molecules of your neurons, reshaping the way they connect to one another. That means your brain is literally made of memories, and memories constantly remake your brain. This framework for memory dates back decades, and a sprawling new review published today in Neuron adds an even finer point. Memory exists because your brain's molecules, cells, and synapses can tell time. Very interesting. And then on that point, experiencing one world history as we do is like riding a train down a track from the past to the future. As passengers on the train, we see events go by like stations along the track. There goes the Roman Empire, there goes World War II, and look, people are landing on the moon. But the universe might be like a giant switching yard with many such railroad tracks interlaced. Next to our track is one on which World War II never happened. A train is constantly encountering switches at which it may take either of two lines. Before World War II, there may have been a day when Hitler could have been killed, diverting the train onto a track on which World War II did not occur. I like this photograph of Lamu from Utamu or Lamu. And then this is a short clip from Pathé News, the city of Mombasa in 1953. Political Reflections, my piece over the weekend, was called China Rising. China's parabolic rise has been simply breathtaking. Millions of Chinese have been lifted out of poverty, and China continues to expand at a pace that other big economies can only dream about. Xi Jinping's One Belt, One Road program binds the world to Beijing because all the roads and railways have but one destination, that is China. Washington has metasized into an epicenter of risk, Donald Trump refers, and talk of a unipolar US-dominated world have largely evaporated. President Putin refused to be rolled over by a Victoria Newland-inspired colour revolution in the Ukraine and drew a line in the sand, and one of the collateral consequences of that was to send President Putin into the ready embrace of Xi Jinping. In fact, far from being a unipolar world, we have entered a bipolar or even tripolar world, US, China, and Russia. Apart from a few half-hearted and timid FONOPs, freedom of navigation operations, China has established control over the South China Sea. It has created artificial islands and then militarized those artificial islands across the South China Sea. It is a mind-boggling geopolitical advance, any which way you care to cut it. China has advanced its footprint in Pakistan, where it has leased the Gwadar port, giving China and Central Asia access to the Gulf region and the Middle East for 43 years. Sri Lanka, which gorged on Chinese debt, has had to disgorge the Hambantota port to its creditor. And recently we saw China formally open a facility in Djibouti. These moves taken together speak to a material Chinese advance. The pivot to Asia, which was supposed to contain China, is dead in the water, and China has sprung that trap. China is also in Narendra Modi's face in the Doklam Plateau, which sits at the tri-junction region of Bhutan, China, and India. It's as if Xi Jinping is goading Narendra Modi, who would be seriously ill-advised to take on the Chinaman in that remote plateau. Apparently both sides are now standing down. The Financial Times carried an article last week which described China's embrace of asymmetric warfare, which spoke of a revolution in military affairs, and described a new swarm technology. With their tiny propellers buzzing, the fleet of Chinese aircraft, little larger than model planes, are flung into the air one at a time by huge rubber bands. Soon the sky is full of toy-like drones flying in formations over unidentified mountains in China. Each tiny aircraft, bought online for a few $100s, is loaded with software and sensors capable of communicating with the other drones in the swarm. Developers are working towards a future where thousands could operate in sync, identifying and attacking targets. This goes all the way back to the tactics of Attila the Hun, says Randall Stieb. A light attack force that can defeat more powerful and sophisticated opponents. They come out of nowhere, attack from all sides, and then disappear over and over. Once upon a time, the Chinese built the Great Wall of China to keep the barbarians out, and President Trump and other wannabe wall builders seem to have entered a wormhole and are now following that ancient Chinese script, which China itself long ago jettisoned. Meanwhile, China has jumped its wall and is advancing with a surety of purpose, which is quite remarkable. I'll put up a photograph of the US conducting a FONOP operation in the South China Sea. Another photograph of President Xi Jinping inspecting troops of the People's Liberation Army during a parade. An example and a link to an article in the Mail Online, how Beijing has fully militarized the South China Sea islands. And then another photograph of the China People's Liberation Army Naval Patrol near a sign in the Spratly Islands. President Duterte has already said, "Why should I defend a sandbar and kill Filipinos because of a sandbar?" So, plenty of this to confirm that advance. And even with the two sides standing down in the plateau, I still think the warning has been sent to Narendra Modi. I'll also put up a photograph of the Great Wall of China. Jim Mattis, in a video captured by News Chambers, said, "Hold the line until our country gets back to understanding and respecting each other." He said this to US troops. Rex Tillerson, in an interview on Fox News, says Donald Trump speaks for himself over the Charlottesville response. During an interview on Fox News on Sunday, Mr. Tillerson, the US Secretary of State, told host Chris Wallace that the State Department expresses America's values We represent the American people. We represent America's values, our commitment to freedom, our commitment to the equal treatment of people the world over. And that message has never changed, Mr. Tillerson said. Mr. Wallace then suggested that people may begin to doubt whether we're living those values following Mr. Trump's response to violence that broke out at a white supremacist rally in Charlottesville and the United Nations reaction to the president's comments. I don't believe anyone doubts the American people's values or the commitment of the American government or the government's agencies to advancing those values and defending those values, Tillerson said. And the president's values, Mr. Wallace asked, to which the Secretary of State replied, the president speaks for himself, Chris. And clearly, that implies that the President of the United States doesn't speak for Americans. Take a look at this man waving Blacks for Trump sign who insists the president is not racist, a former member of a violent cult. Very interesting take on him via The Intercept. And then something very funny from The Daily Show. You have to look at the backup dancers. Why are people still listening to Trump's words? It's a short link, well worth listening to. International markets record Houston flooding, captured in this photograph from Business. Currency markets, let's take a look. The euro dollar 119.22, the dollar index 92.48, Japanese yen 109.15, Swiss franc 0.9561, the pound 128.89, Australian dollar 0.7939, India rupee 63.905, South Korean won 11.1957, Brazilian real 316.01, Egyptian pound 17.68, and the South African rand is around the 13.04 level. The dollar plunged on Friday to the lowest level since 2015. Take a look at the dollar index. And you can see we've now moved a full figure away from that key level of 93.50. The euro leapt above 119. Take a look at this chart that Holger posted. We're currently at 119.21. So we saw big moves in the currency markets. I think it was just because Draghi didn't really say anything, and nor did Janet Yellen. Very interesting interview and article in Bloomberg. Jack Ma sees decades of pain as internet upends old economy. Alibaba chairman Jack Ma said society should prepare for decades of pain as the internet disrupts the economy. The world must change education systems and establish how to work with robots to help soften the blow caused by automation and the internet economy, Ma said in a speech to an entrepreneurship conference in Zhengzhou, China. In the next 30 years, the world will see much more pain than happiness, Ma said, of job disruptions caused by the internet's social conflicts in the next 3 decades will have an impact on all sorts of industries and walks of life. Unusual speech for the Alibaba co-founder, who tends to embrace his role as a visionary and extol the promise of the future. 15 years ago, he said, I gave speeches 200 or 300 times reminding everyone the internet will impact all industries, but people didn't listen because I was a nobody. Take a look at that. He also warned that longer lifespans and better artificial intelligence were likely to lead to both aging labor forces and fewer jobs. Machines should only do what humans cannot, he said. Only in this way can we have the opportunities to keep machines as working partners with humans rather than as replacements. And there's a short video we took when he was visiting, and he said, in the old days we just had the Silk Road. In the future it will be the E-Road. Change means opportunity. And if you're interested in the entire event that we had here at the Kempinski, where he was the chief guest, take a look at the YouTube video that is on Rich Ramos. Commodity markets, gold was shaken by a mysterious 2 million ounce trade on Friday, but has subsequently recovered from that 2 million ounce sell-off, inspired sell-off to trade at 1297.98. It's been up to these levels, 1300 plus 3 times. So it's really key as to how we progress from here. In a span of 1 minute, gold futures contracts equaling more than 2 million ounces traded about 20 minutes before the Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen was to address a gathering of policymakers in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. Chart of the weekend is oil. This is from trading channels. Oil was last at $47.45, and it's unusually bearish trading given the events in Houston. And then have a look at this. The US is muscling in on crude sales to China. That's via Bloomberg Gadfly. Venezuelan bonds are yielding the most versus US Treasuries since at least 2006. The South American nation's debt is paying yields that are nearly 29 percentage points higher than those on similar US Treasuries. That's just amazing. Sub-Saharan Africa, MPLA, was always expected to dominate the election, and they did just that, snaring a 61% victory according to preliminary results. But with President Jose Eduardo dos Santos set to step down, the predictable outcome still means a fresh face at the helm of the country. Howie Lorenzo campaigned on a winning platform of corruption busting and economy boosting in a country badly hit by weak oil prices. The Angolan economy, sub-Saharan Africa's third largest, has been crippled by oil prices that have halved since mid-2014 and led to zero growth for 2016. An inflation rate of 30% and a shortage of dollars. Angola depends on oil for more than 90% of its export earnings. Rafael Marquez told the Financial Times Lorenzo won't control anything. He can't touch Sonangol, the state diamond company, the sovereign fund, the military, or the police. I think I will have all the power, Lorenzo said last week. I only wouldn't have all the power if there were 2 presidents of the country, which is not the case. Very interesting, but we'll have to watch those developments. Do you think you have now successfully created a new Rwandan identity? The FT asks Paul Kagame. He says, without a doubt. And then he makes some very interesting points about DNA. I'll tell you, I have nothing to hide. It's talking about genetic diseases can be known and avoided. He told me a lot of things about the science, and I got interested. An acquaintance said this science could help us prove or disprove these political theories that have created problems because the Belgians tried, but they never came with any conclusion in the 1960s to prove that how we are different here in Rwanda. You probably heard about that. I said, I don't mind, and I told him, I said, by the way, I don't even mind knowing my map. You can go into my DNA and genome and find out what it is. Actually, I took a test, so now I know a bit of my own. And he's saying basically there's some Hutu in him as well. Interesting interview. SADC's emerging assumption that Kabila or chaos cannot hold is misleading. The SADC has been soft peddling on Kabila. President Zuma has a strong relationship with President Kabila. Africa's biggest company sees e-commerce growth closing a $32 billion valuation gap. What they're referring to is this Naspers trades at a $31.6 billion deficit in the value of its 10-cent stake. Interesting piece by Calestis Juma, African megacities as emerging innovation ecosystems. Take a look at that. There are at least 5 interconnected dimensions that form the structure of a megacity innovation ecosystem and determine the quality in terms of its attractiveness and innovation potential. They are entrepreneurship, education, environment, culture, and connectivity. Thus, megacity ecosystems should function as self-accelerating their own creativity and innovativeness, and as magnets for attracting talents and innovation. Johannesburg's benchmark index closed an all-time high on Friday. It's up 11.85% year-to-date. Dollar versus rand. The rand's been firming to 13.04. Egyptian pound at 17.68. The naira was quoted at 370 to the dollar on the black market on Wednesday, as against 368. It is stuck at around, and on the official rate is 305, just to get a feel of what the discount is. Nigerian all shares up 36.36% year to date. Ghana's composite index is up 38.68% year to date. James Orengo doesn't know what he lost. He wants to open your house and see what you stole from him. What a walking confusion. That was the Frederick Ngatia lawyer at this Supreme Court petition. The court has subsequently allowed read-only access to both sides. I don't think there's a smoking gun. For such a serious allegation, you need it. I haven't seen it yet. A newly released report shows that Kenya's fertility rate has stagnated at 3.9, or about 4 children in the past 2 years, having dropped from an average of 5 in 2008. And this is considerably less than the rest of East Africa, where Burundi is 5.5, Uganda 5.4, Tanzania 5.2, Ethiopia 4.6, Rwanda 4.2. And this African youth demographic, which many characterize as a demographic dividend, but for beautiful Blaise Compaoré, turned into a demographic terminator. It's quite binary in my view. Kenya shilling was below 103 earlier today. Nairobi all shares up 29.23% and at 27-month closing highs. Safaricom up 43.44% year to date on a total return basis and at a record high. I&M reported first half earnings per share declined 16.825%. Loans and advances to customers grew 9.122%, probably ahead of its peer group. Investment securities was only up 3.633%, that's behind its peer group. Total assets up 8.979% to 229.223 billion. Interest income was down 6.22%, obviously with the cap. Interest expense down 9.002%. Net fees and commission income sharply up 16.654%. Revenue down 1.459%. Operating income down 0.213%. Operating expenses, however, were up at 18.29%. Profit before income tax was down 14.782%. Profit after tax down 17.878%. EPS was down 16.825%. I&M Holdings Incorporated in Kenya and is domiciled in Kenya. Bank shares are listed on the Nairobi Securities Exchange. I&M Holdings and its subsidiaries operate in Kenya, Tanzania, Rwanda, Uganda, and Mauritius. And of course, they bought out Gyro Bank earlier this year. Slightly behind its peer group, operating expenses also surged quite high, but it's obviously still in a growth curve. Now, NSE 20 up 27.71% year to date. Kenya's Acorn Group and Helios to construct 3,800 hostels worth $68 million. That's from a state cloud KE. Flametree Group reported that its first half earnings per share declined 18%. Revenue was up 4.858%. Cost of sales was up 9.98%, however. Selling and distribution costs largely in line. Admin expenses down 7.024%. Profit before a gain on the disposal of PPE was down 2.55%. They did not book a gain from that disposal. Finance costs were in line. Profit before tax down 7.2%. Profit for the year down 17.428%. Talking about revenue increase of 5%, according to Mr. Harold Bangera, the CEO, we continue to see progressive improvement in net sales as we make progress towards the transformation of the group. I'm pleased with our first half results, and our year-to-date performance is progressing in line with expectations. Revenue for the half year increased 5% operationally. excluding the unfavourable impacts of foreign exchange and continued challenges experienced with some of the leading retailers. The manufacturing vertical revenues posted 3% growth, while the trading vertical grew by 11% in that period. Once again, thank you for stopping by.